Welcome to the Digital Forester Podcast, where we talk to foresters about how they are using digital technologies in their day-to-day forestry work. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Digital Foresters Podcast. Michael Dooner, Mike Berzinis, thanks so much for joining. How are you guys doing this morning?
Excellent.
Doing good, Kevin. Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Good stuff. So I think it'll be an amazing discussion this morning. You folks are in the U.S. Southeast doing some cool things. So I'd like to take the discussion left, right, center, up, down. You folks are foresters. So maybe start off, I'll start with Michael. You maybe introduce yourself, how you got into forestry, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Kind of an interesting story of how I got into forestry. Growing up in the Southeast, of course, we were surrounded by forest and natural resources everywhere before the Southeast became such a popular destination for you Northerners. My dad was in the certified public accounting business, and I worked for him when I was between my junior and senior years in high school. Worked in his office doing auditing of the public school system here in our county, and learned pretty quickly that that I did not want to follow in his footsteps. So kind of took a different career path immediately, and actually was in veterinary medicine originally until I ran into organic chemistry, and then I decided I needed to take another change in career path. So pre-vet and pre-forestry curriculums were exactly the same, except for the organic chemistry part. And I had also worked at a plywood mill and worked for a forest products company between my 10th and 11th grade years in high school. So I had some exposure there. So that was always kind of in the back of my mind. So anyway, I ended up at the University of Florida in the Forest Resources and Conservation program, and have been in the consulting forestry business since June of 1980, when I graduated from forestry school.
Wow. So you've been at this just for a little bit of time by the sounds of it, right? Yeah. That's great. Mike, how about you introduce yourself? How did you get into to forestry? Were you like Michael early on, right into it, or what's your story?
Yeah, it's funny. There's a bit of a similarity there. I'm from the state of Maine, and some of my family was into fishing boats and scallop dragging and things like that. And I figured out pretty quickly after trying that a couple summers that I wanted to do something else. So I was actually in the military in the Carolinas, in the Air Force. And once I finished that 4-year stint, I pursued my passion just for the outdoors through forestry. And I've always been into the outdoors. I grew up in Maine, which is a heavily forested state, and I grew up outdoors. I've always loved the outdoors, and forestry and wood products were always all around us, where I grew up. And it's a big part of the Northeast. And so, I had that passion always in my mind, and finally got to pursue it. Really enjoyed going to school here in the Carolinas, and had a variety of different jobs since then. I have with different forest products companies, and been here with Southern Forestry Consultants for going on about 3.5 years. And I've always in my career had to stick with the technology side of things. So always been working in that capacity to help foresters innovate and enable what they do, and to enable what they do to be more efficient and better and more data driven.
Right. Well, growing up in Maine, by default, you're an honorary Canadian, I suppose, as we joke about those states up there. But yeah, great story there. So thinking as you're introducing, how long you've been with Southern Forestry Consultants or SFC. that's time's gone by fast. We've known each other for quite a while. I've obviously met Michael through you, but thinking about what SFC does, Michael, maybe can you introduce the things you do? Because I know when we first met, SFC is not just SFC. There's an ecology side of things. There's other aspects. So maybe take a moment and just let our listeners know where SFC is based, what you do, the different sites that you have, because it is quite an impressive network in the U.S. Southeast that you've established over the years.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Having been in the consulting forestry business for my entire career, it's given me some insight into what consulting forestry was originally considered to be and what maybe it was limited to being versus what it has become. And that's certainly in no way meant to disparage early consulting foresters. But the consulting forestry business and SFC, I think, as a leader in this evolution of consulting forestry firms to include ecological considerations, wildlife considerations, habitat management, technology management and implementation, threatened and endangered species work, just everything that revolves around natural resource management. I think and SFC has formed through the years, has also added Wiregrass Ecological Associates to our companies, Southern Forestry Realty. We even had at one time Southern Development Group, which was, we do have clients that who are in the path of land use change, whether they choose that or it's just chosen for them by the growth that is occurring in the Southeast U.S. So we have evolved to provide services of almost every nature, either through direct housing those direct services in our shop or partnering with other companies who are experts in a certain field that are very complementary to what we do and to what our clients need. So with offices in Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, South Carolina, North Carolina now, our reach has expanded through the years. And we feel like we again, either directly through our staffing capabilities or indirectly through very good partnerships with others who are experts in complementary fields, we can provide nearly every service that a landowner of any shape, size, form could possibly need.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really neat to hear, and that's one of the reasons I was excited to talk to both of you. So for our listeners, SFC and Limb Geomatics have a relationship. You're a partner, you're a value-added reseller for some of our technologies in the Southeast. So thinking of that, obviously, forestry consultant work. Mike, you've worked with Esri Inc., you've worked with other organizations, as you mentioned, on the technology side. So maybe between the two of you, maybe Mike, I'll ask you to start. Tell me how you and Michael connected and how the Geospatial group started within SFC. And then I'll be curious to know, Michael, you can chime in terms of what vision you saw to make this new entity come in. So Mike, maybe I'll start with you and say, tell us your view and how you ended up at SFC with your career path.
Yeah, sure, Kevin. It's a great question. Previously I did work with Esri, which is a leading GIS software company. And really, I found my preferences to work with agile, smaller firms that are entrepreneurial. And so I did have some friends that worked in the SFC's organization, And there was some good raw material that existed in this organization in terms of some GIS and geospatial and technology work within the industry. So we struck up a conversation and ended up where I joined the company and still work out of North Carolina. And really one of the big things that was attractive to me is SFC offered the chance to start from the ground up, because I think trying to build a new house on top of a shaky foundation is just not going to work. And when we look at the technology and how much has changed over the past 20 years or so, and how much the industry has changed in terms of funding technology and where it comes from, it really needed to rethink everything from the bottom up. And so
right.
What my business line says is we're redefining forest technology. We're just started from scratch.
Yeah.
And part of that is working with your team, a full stack development team, to try to do this right. And so really plays into my my love for innovation and for forestry and staying in this industry that I have always been in and really care about. I'm really interested in how do we make people be more successful. So if we can help people be more successful with technology, I think that's success for us.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's a great thesis there. And Michael, from your side, meeting Mike, how as someone who's been in the field for a while, maybe tell us about that first meeting and your initial response. Mike being a very technology centric guy, you being a consulting forester, knowing the lay of the land, boots on the ground. Maybe describe to our listeners what that initial coming together looked like.
Well, it's I've always believed from a management perspective that surrounding yourself with very talented people with complementary interest is the prime way to move your business forward, or to move any effort forward. It doesn't have to be business. If you've got 20 people with the same talents in the room, you're going to do pretty well at that one or two things that they all do well, but your focus is going to be pretty narrow. And so meeting Mike was actually through one of my partners in the firm who's in the ecological business. And who focuses more on the wildlife side of things, the habitat side of things, and seeing what Mike was doing and how he was assisting that business line and that effort and those projects was the results really spoke for themselves. Mike was the messenger and was the talent, that was able to bring those results to bear. So, honestly, when I look at someone or another tool in the toolbox, I don't really, it's not looking at the person as much as the talents and the skill set and the results and the how they complement what we're trying to do, or how they complement what we may be able to do that we haven't even thought of. And, natural resource people tend to be, although this is certainly evolving through time now, where the younger people are more technologically advanced than us older folks ever dreamed of being.
Right.
But still, there is a bit of, reticence to use technology to the fullest extent possible. And a lot of it's still unknown. And again, that kind of goes to our partnership with you and your folks to move that forward, really, in an exponential way, not in an incremental way, but an exponential way. And Mike brought that skill set to us, and Mike yearned for an opportunity, and we're always looking for a niche or or an opportunity that needs to be built upon, but built upon in a in a much better way. So Mike's skill set and results spoke for themselves, and even so much that I could overlook that he was a far New Englander. He fit right in the Southeast, so that speaks highly for him right there.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, great way of looking at things, Michael. People first, finding people to compliment. I love that thesis there. And Mike, hey, this is a podcast, so that glowing review the next time for the next 20 years when you're doing your annual performance review, feel free to pull up this podcast, show it to Michael, and there you go.
This is recorded.
Absolutely, in perpetuity. So it's an engine. You could just come back to this pod and share it. So on that side, with this podcast, the Digital Forester, it's really about what are foresters doing, people who have successfully embraced technology, and what are some of those lessons learned and whatnot. So maybe I'll start, Mike, with you to talk about what you talked about, building that right foundation. So tell me about some of the things you're doing for foresters in the Southeast and elsewhere. I guess it's, although you're based in the Southeast, you're obviously willing to do business anywhere, I guess, nowadays, especially with people, you never know where people are. But maybe tell me, the audience, what are some of those things you're doing, and then we can segue that into what some of those best practices are. So I know, as an example, cruising is important. I know obviously with the GIS background, you're doing some of that, but I believe you're a Planet partner as well, so able to support people in remote sensing. But again, I don't want to speak on your behalf. So maybe from your view, it's like, what do you see the landscape in the US Southeast to be, and how you're helping them, and with what tools?
Yeah, sure. Where to start on that? Well, without going into a lot of the systemic factors in our industry, we don't have a lot of vertically integrated companies. The industry's just changed a lot. How technology percolates out, maybe out of universities and out of industry, that's changed substantially, and the options have changed in the computing world. Computing technology and hardware and all of that have been consumerized, and the options available are a little bit overwhelming for folks. So, if I was to, pick one thing that embodies what I do with the industry, and that'd be educating. Really, a lot of what I have to do is just educating folks and informing them, and that's whether that's before we do something with somebody or well on down the road. It's a lot of my job is just to educate and to inform, and so I enjoy that. And what does that look like on the ground for folks? A typical implementation, and we do support customers all the way from the Carolinas to Arkansas and the Deep South. So we've got customers all over, and really what we're trying to do, whether it's for forest inventory or all your forest assets, is provide people a single source of the truth. Because what a lot of folks are trying to do, and this is all sizes of companies, is they're trying to cobble together a bunch of different pieces and parts very often to try to execute on their business strategy. And that's quite problematic for folks, because everybody has a smartphone now, or multiple smart devices. And you expect to be able to work from anywhere, and you expect to be able to have your teams on the same sheet of music. So when we look at Planet, Lim Geomatics, Prism, Stratus, some of our own products and services, managed services, we come in and we really try to help people get that single source of the truth across all the things they're doing, and manage that for them, and make it simple. Right. So it's super, super exciting. And this is really about enabling people in this digital age. You just got, let's just put it right out in the open. A lot of forestry people didn't get into forestry to mess around with technology. They're rural people. And, some of that stuff kind of actually alarms them. And they want to be out there in the woods and hunting and fishing and just being out there. And I think, you've got a bit of a cultural divide to bridge when you're doing that education, but it certainly is really fun and really rewarding,
Right.
to see these successes that come on the other side, where people can finally look up anything about their land base, be able to do forest inventory and do it easy, not get into data management and file management and all these things, because foresters don't want to do that stuff. I mean, that's not why they got in the industry.
Right.
So
Right.
that's a real quick kind of spiel across a bunch of concepts, but a lot of my job is education, as I said.
Yeah, that's a great way to frame it, because I think as foresters, and maybe in any space, no one wants to babysit, data at that level. Well, unless you're a DBA or database administrator, I guess, where that's your stick. But so thinking about that, obviously you're using some Esri technology, I believe, cloud-based. It's Azure. That's so you're into that space as well, per se. So that's pretty sophisticated for a forestry, as Michael's like, oh, it's a forestry consulting shop, but yet some of these technologies and tools you're using in this digital age, they're pretty sophisticated and up with what other people are doing. And I know the CEO of Microsoft had said, at the start of the pandemic, he had seen 2 years worth of digital transformation done in the span of 2 years. So I'm going to imagine, Michael, that when Mike talks about education being front and center, I'm going to imagine that executing that vision that you guys have in terms of a digital forestry in the U.S. Southeast, one source of truth, no data silos, which for some of our listeners, they might think like, well, I guess it's primarily foresters listening, so it may not surprise them, but maybe for others, they might say like, how could you not have that? But when Mike's talking about education, I'm going to assume the pace of change may not go as quickly as maybe some other sectors per se, if there's a large onus on education. Michael, what do you think about that?
Well, I think the education part is really it's two parts. One is educating we'll call them the field foresters, or the boots on the ground foresters, who have now at their disposal tools that they heretofore have never had, or who have iterations or products now that far exceed the previously existing products, and thus our relationship with you all to try to develop some of those tools. So that's part of the education. I think that's what Mike was really speaking about there, was just educating those boots on the ground foresters, and even the GIS foresters, which is most of them are known as, I guess, nowadays. But the other side of that education is really from the upper level management, the business side of the forest industry. It's educating the businessmen and women, the corporate folks who may not know that this capability exists, and who are relying on the old technology and the old way of doing business, to try to run a business in this ever-changing climate that we're in now. This rapidly evolving business world where daily trades or not even daily trades, minute by minute trades are done, and business changes every hour. So to have for their utilization, these products and these technologies that allow them that business capability of being that agile and that informed, to be able to run their business at the same level that a Fortune 500 company runs at. So educating them that the technology is there if they just know about it, and it can be implemented, and it can assist their business operations, and it will improve their business operations. Whether it's on the cost side or the efficiency side or the profit side. but being better informed and better able to get at your data instantaneously, you can't replace that as
right.
a function of a well-run business. So I think that education part, again, I think is twofold, and it's tough, to start from trying to do all that education, at one time. It's to use the old adage, trying to turn a ship around, it just takes a while, and people have to gain confidence in what can be done, and see other people doing it. And
right.
So, that's part of my role, because I certainly don't even understand the technology, or how it's developed and how it's built and how it functions, and all the coding and that part of it that goes in, and I'm too old to learn, but what I do understand is the business side of things, and I know how much information, how valuable it is, even to a regional consulting forestry firm.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of my take on the education part of things and how it needs to be integrated into the business side of forestry.
Yeah, so I suspect there's quite a few foresters that may be listening and probably, nodding their head going, yeah, like so many true points here, looking to start, not sure where to start, completely foreign language per se, needing experts and whatnot. Still a lot of relationships at play, I think, in the forest industry, to your point, that you just may not be aware that there's something else out there. I also do know, and I think you all would agree as well. See, I used to live in Huntsville, Alabama, so I should probably switch to y'all. Y'all would agree that foresters don't want to be the first ones, but they sure as heck don't want to be the last ones either. And so somewhere there's that sweet spot. So thinking about some of those innovations, Mike and Michael, maybe give some hard facts, like in terms of what you've seen. We've helped this customer X, and they saw, thinking cruising using technology. Would you say 2% increase in efficiency, 25, 50? Like, is this a real game changer in your space as you're talking with people and educating people? Or maybe share some of those success stories. Another thing is foresters are very humble people. They rarely, beat their chest in terms of all the great things they're doing, but maybe take a moment and share with our listeners, what you're seeing in terms of hard values or benefits. And maybe that will get some of our GIS foresters thinking about doing this, kind of going, yeah, I got to talk with these folks. I got to explore further. But anything you can share on that front?
Want me to take that, Michael, first, or?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, it can be hard to see all the benefits and the pain of change at the front end of an effort. So, again, that education does come into play, because a lot of foresters are content to just do things the way they always have. However, they've all got, modern pickup trucks with Apple, the Apple Play in it, or the and a smartphone, and they've embraced technology in a lot of their aspects of their lives, and they recognize that the little hunting app, mapping app on their phone is pretty dang handy. And they also recognize at the same time that, well, why doesn't our business data operate like this? So I think, it's a conversation a lot of times. And then when you get a little further in and you get some of the pain of change as has been worked through, and the catharsis, so to speak, you start to see some pretty amazing outcomes. We've got a lumber company with lands in the Carolinas, where their quote for using the new inventory technology is just half the time what it used to be, because it automates. We can do that today.
Wow.
We can automate the whole value chain of data and information. And when Michael sort of talked about education being different to different people in different ways, the field people to the business people, I mean, that's really true, because a guy just cruising timber in the woods would be happy with a paper tally card forever, because he might not see where the paper tally card goes, and it gets handed to an administrative specialist where they spend an hour keying it in, and then somebody else takes the data and they move it to a database, and this whole set of things that used to take place for folks. And our industry is really big on that. Put it on paper and then transcribe it and handle it 4 or 5 times. And look, I know a bunch of foresters in this industry, and a lot of them are spending a lot of late nights at the expense of what to handle information. And those are all solvable problems nowadays. It just takes a different set of talents in this computing world that we're in. It is nothing like 20 years ago, where you just make an application that goes on a PC and you're done and you walk away. That's not the way it is anymore. We've got mobility, cloud, Apple, Android, web, and all this stuff needs to fit together where the components function as a whole. And really, you're not going to get a lot of value today and get that mobility and visibility of your information unless you can utilize these tools that are there. So the efficiencies are huge, and we see payback that's 1 or 2 projects in for some of these efforts.
Wow. Well, I think you make a great point there that we hadn't touched on that. It's not just about the tools being available, but them all working together behind the scenes technologically, but also on the forefront from a business point of view. And Michael, when you hear 50% increase in efficiency, as a business owner on the business side, is that not music to the ears, in the sense of like, hey, it's like, there's real opportunity. Like 50% is huge, and if 1 or 2 projects generates that ROI on any of that GIS investment, that's pretty huge. No
doubt, Kevin. I mean, any businessman would embrace a 50% increase in efficiency, especially when that's tied to the other benefits that accrue to that effort. I mean, it's not only the data collection where you get that up to 50% efficiency, but you also then have the data in a form that is live and accessible, by all in the organization at any time. And so, whether it's the accounting department or the timber department or the procurement department or the corporate department, or any of the different departments within the organization can access the same data anytime, and it's updated live whenever the boots on the ground forester, for whatever reason, has to make a change in the data, whether it's just another year's gone by, whether it's a weather event, whether it's an acquisition or a disposition of property. Whenever the raw data is changed for good reason, everyone has that same data immediately. There's no lag time. There's anybody in the accounting. One thing I did learn in the accounting world is, transcribing numbers is fraught with human error, and that goes back to the dark ages. It's just humans make errors. Some make less than others, and that's great. But that single source of information, as a business owner, is the value that you place on that is really hard to determine. But the efficiency goes throughout the organization and continues to benefit the organization every day. And it's hard to put a value on that, but it is invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think when at one point when I was talking with you guys, like you guys use as you technology. I know some listeners might be saying, what are the actual tools you're using? And maybe we'll get to that in a moment, Mike. But I know talking with you guys in the past, you've kind of got things set up in your shop and trying to support others, where at the end of the day at 5 o'clock, exactly, if we're thinking of a cruising job, what's being done, which plots, which have been left, and even potentially from a workforce management point of view, adjusting assignments, cruise plots assignments and whatnot, and having that all in one central FMS there. But Mike, maybe I'll get you to maybe talk about, tell the listeners, since this is about digital forestry and digital technologies, maybe walk the listeners through, if you can, of course, what does a technology stack look like for an SFC, that foundation that you talked about at the start? What does that look like? We've heard Esri as a component, some Planet for some, situational awareness of what's happening, but maybe walk through the listeners, what are those technologies you're actually using as a consulting forestry organization, and as you grow to other spaces, what does that world look like?
Sure. Yeah. So, each customer has something a little bit different. We basically offer the ability for a componentized solution for managing forest assets. So, very typical deployment is we'll run the enterprise WebGIS for folks, and it's all secure, meets all their IT security requirements. And they might have the forest inventory solution called Prism. They might have Planet imagery, and all this stuff can function as a complete whole. So we address not only the different modules and pieces they need for different purposes, whether it's timber sales, forest inventory, imagery, but we also address all the different user types and ways different users need different things. So again, off of all one single source of information, but we can give a manager a view-only dashboard where they can just kind of come in and see, okay, what's all the planned treatments and activities on deck this year? And they can do that in something easy. They're not going to edit data, they're just going to see it. We can give a field tech a map that shows them everything that's going on, and it's just on their phone. And that's the only place they consume that information. We give a timber cruiser, stuff on their phone, and then also Prism for doing the inventory stuff. And, you kind of mentioned there a minute ago is we're doing these big projects that are quite complex, with thousands of forest inventory plots and multiple people in the woods simultaneously. And people just push a button at the end of the day and all the information's in, and we know where our project is. And, when we first started doing that with some of these field folks, and they'd never seen that before, it was pretty eye-opening. I mean, because what they used to do is they used to spend hours every night manually putting all the data together. And this is the stuff that, Michael's level sometimes don't see. It just happens. People just make it happen. But it is time. And it's time that gets taken away from something. Is you're managing data for 4 or 5 hours at night after you've worked in the field all day. And you're making maps, and then you're laying it all out and trying to figure out what you're doing tomorrow. When that's all gone, ultimately you can get more plots a day. Ultimately, you get a better quality of life because you can push that button at the end of the day, go to the hotel, take a shower, go and have dinner and a beer, and be well rested to go cruise again the next day. So, there's no smoke and mirrors in this stuff. The opportunities are huge, and so we really look at this same concept of automation and having a whole bunch of component parts that fit into a whole and function together. And it's super exciting. One thing we never realized that IT would be our friends. So we frequently have conversations with the IT professionals and organizations. And that's important nowadays because we have multiple customers. They've been hacked and ransomware. And why is it? Well, they waited 20 years to update some of their stuff, and they really didn't have standards across their information assets. So we come in and help them really get everything, level it up, and get it to modern day standards, and address that security side of things to make sure that the IT people are happy and this stuff functions. If we put it in Azure cloud, we don't see hacking going on there. You want to put it on your own servers, you're kind of asking for it. So that's a lot of information, but in a nutshell, kind of what it looks like in some of the scenarios and some of the benefit outcomes.
Right. But lots there, absolutely. And I think you bring up a great point that foresters, traditional or GIS foresters or whatever label you want to use, whether you want it or not, you're getting pulled into the digital age and being exposed to cybersecurity risks that, whether you're a tier 1 large company or tier 3 mom and pop shop, it's the same playing field with the same vectors of attack that people are going to try and get at. And it's until you get impacted, I don't think people realize that. And on our side, I think last year alone, there's 4 forestry companies and not mom and pop shops, significant forestry firms and companies that were subject to ransomware, and it brought them, like if I said brought them to their knees, I'd be being kind. It brought them, into the grave at some points and whatnot, and where some of their business units that were using what you described, our technology and other enterprise level technologies, those units were up and running still without any disruption. And just for clarification, earlier when you said enterprise, you're talking about ArcGIS Enterprise, right? Not just enterprise in general. Okay, cool, absolutely. So thinking about looking at our time, we'll go into some rapid fire sessions. So one of the things I'd like to ask each of you is, in this discussion, you can sense there's a lot there, from a cyber, from a cloud to an enterprise GIS to an Esri. It doesn't sound like open source is quite as big there, but there's databases, there's IT teams. Amazing to hear you say, normally we look at IT groups as like, oh, you're the enemy, right? And now they're almost becoming friends because maybe they're being advocates for foresters on areas that foresters don't think about. But thinking about, I'm going to ask each of you, and maybe I'll start with Michael. What's the top myth that you hear, and what's your response? Like, thinking of this, you've been obviously a forester for a long time. When we listen to you, there's obviously a rich knowledge base there, but thinking about the vision you have, exponentially better software, not incrementally better. What's maybe 1 or 2 things you hear, like myth-wise, that time and time again you've heard it and you're like, gee whiz, if I could just like address this once and for all, and not to think that this podcast will do it, but for our listeners, they may have those reservations themselves. So maybe from a business point of view, I'll start, Michael, with you in terms of what are 1 or 2 things that you consistently hear time and time again, and how would you respond to that, or tell our listeners that may be thinking that way?
Yeah, Kevin, that's interesting. Interesting question, but I two responses come immediately to mind. One is that we being the potential customer or the forestry company, we're using technology. We have technology. We don't need more technology, or we don't need a different technology. We already have technology. We have a computer, and we work our cruises up on a computer, and we have access to aerial imagery, and we draw maps on a computer, and therefore we are where we need to be. That is a myth that was true 20 years ago. That was true maybe even a few years ago, but that lack of information about what is currently available in the technology space is really alarming, almost. But that's again, maybe that's our fault for not having done a good enough job educating. But therein lies the challenge. And then I think the other myth is based really around the cost of implementing this new technology. Certainly there is a cost that absolutely you can't replace anything old with something that's exponentially better, for free. But what's overlooked is the efficiencies that are gained and the opportunity cost, that are the opportunities for more efficient use of labor, of talents, of skills, of other resources that's left out of the equation when the analysis is done as to whether to adopt new technology or not. It's really surprising, but again, those 2 myths, that A, we already have technology, we don't need new technology, and B, it's only a cost center to adopt new technology.
Yeah, great points, Michael. Thanks for sharing that from the view. Yeah, totally. As you're describing that, I can even on the Canadian side, we work internationally. Those objections, if we call them that, we hear them elsewhere per se, and that may be a common thread across forestry. So, Mike, on your side, maybe I assume being more on the techie whizzy side, what's that thing you always hear, those one or two things, and if having the stage to get a lot of people's ears, what's that messaging you'd want to impart with them?
Yeah, I think Michael hit it pretty good, and I might have picked one of those same things that he mentioned, but to complement that, I would say is we've always done something a certain way, or this is what everybody else does. They look around at my peers and they use an Apple or they use an Android, and so that's okay. And so really because of that, you have a lot of stuff that's really, really old out there. And until somebody gets bit and they lose information or they get hacked, sometimes it's hard to justify doing things a different way. So I think that idea of we already have our stuff, and they think it works, and that's what Joe Smith down the road is doing. They're just like us, and so we're okay. So I think it's kind of a multifaceted, complementary sort of observation that I have to what Michael said is, it's just a conservative industry. You go in the woods, and the woods don't change much, and you drive down the road, and you're just in an ambiance and a culture where you're used to things being pretty consistent and steady. And the idea of change is disrupting. It's painful, and we understand that, and we get it. So that's kind of my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, great points there. And we've always heard the saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But sometimes you don't know that it's broke, and or there's new opportunities. And part of this Digital Forester podcast, as we talk with different people around the world, personally, I'm hoping the stories that we hear from New Zealand, from Finland, from the US, from Chile and stuff, will help foresters evolve their knowledge, their thinking on that education side. And then I think you guys nailed it great earlier in the side. It's about partnerships. Find the right partners. Trust is always there, but the right ones that can help execute and realize some of those outcomes you want to achieve. So we're getting close to the wind down. Mike, thanks so much. I think our listeners would agree, lots here in this pod in terms of thoughts, and I'm sure many listeners are probably thinking, yeah, I've said that before. Yeah, I've got that problem. It's like, they're doing that. No way. I didn't think that was possible. So thinking of that, you guys, Michael, you've used that term exponentially better. I think that's a great tagline. I think that captures things so eloquently in terms of what you're trying to do. So in that spirit, people who want to reach out to you, learn more about SFC, what you do. Obviously, you've said you work in the U.S. Southeast, but you're open to working wherever, especially in today's world. Geography becomes less and less relevant per se. But if folks want to reach out, Mike, how do they reach you? Website, Twitter, LinkedIn, email? What's that easy way to get a hold of you? And we can put it in our show notes as well. But what's the easiest way to get at you all?
Yeah, sure. So I can be found on LinkedIn. Our website is a real short URL. It's SO as in Sigma Omega Forest.com. And one of our emails, which is on our website as well, is redefine at the same thing, soforest.com. So the redefine is really about what we're doing to help our industry future-proof itself and digitally enable its business. So reach out and say hi.
I love it. It's like you describe yourself as a technical person, SO Sigma Omega. I probably would have said Sam Owen, but that nails it on the head. Michael, how do folks get a hold of you? The easiest way is a text, email, or same thing, website.
Yeah, I mean, I'll show my age here. The website is a good way to get at us. Email, text. I'm a visual, I'm a verbal person. I love, I love face-to-face conversations. I love that, still like that. I certainly email, certainly text, but I love to talk about natural resource management and forestry, and so any way that is more comfortable for someone to reach out is fine with me. But
all right,
love to chat.
Absolutely. And I believe your email on the website, you can find it per se. So I guess in closing, 2x4s are, well, pretty much anything is very expensive. I was talking to my neighbor, the back fence is about to topple over, and we're like, probably not the best year to try and rebuild the fence, probably best to anchor it, but lumber futures had spiked. So I say this a bit facetiously, but you guys must be building your super yachts flush with cash. You got so much lumber in the U.S. Southeast. As I said, I'm kind of joking on that, but maybe in closing, thinking about that, like what do you see the next short runway for SFC? What's that key thing you want to see the community adopt or grow into? Granted that, yeah, a lot of the markets are pretty strong right now and whatnot, but what's that one thing you'd maybe impart, Michael, to the listeners in terms of what the future could look like?
Well, you covered a lot in that little introductory question there. Yeah, building products are sky high. We all know that. We had a president in my lifetime that I remember very, very well, who spoke of trickle down economics, and unfortunately, timber. Trees are an ag commodity, if you want to lump it in a large group, and we all know that agricultural producers are very far away from the retail marketplace, and there's a lot of folks in between and a lot of steps in the process to get from a tree to a board, and unfortunately the profits don't accrue to the producer at the same rate that they accrue to everyone else in the food chain. But I do think that we see enormous potential in owning timberland and managing the assets there, and that rate of return on investment, while it's challenged from time to time, it's still a very good place to invest. It's a good commodity. It's a good asset to own. There's enjoyment there, and there's new markets evolving regularly. The carbon market. We're in Florida, for instance, where I'm home based. The water, clean air, clean water, enough water are so important, and people are beginning to realize that all that begins in the forest. So,
absolutely,
it's a great time to be either an owner or a manager of forest lands, and I think it's only going to get better over time.
Yeah, awesome closing comments, Michael. You captured it perfectly. So I'm wishing the SFC team all the best in making things exponentially better. Mike, thanks so much for joining us on the Digital Foresters podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I enjoyed it very much. We can go on for hours, but absolutely, I think you guys nailed it on the head. Gave a great view of your world, what some of the challenges are, the tools you're using, and I think more importantly, just on that comment, Michael, you've painted a really positive outlook that should get everyone excited, proud to be a forester, proud to be involved with technology and forestry. So thanks to both of you so much for joining me this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It was great.